Hello and welcome back, my lovely Lovecraftians. Today we'll be reading the story of Nyarlathotep by H.P. Lovecraft. Some of you might recognize this name from Persona, of all things. This is a story of one of the Eldritch gods that doesn't really get that much love, but still is often referenced in pop culture and in video games. Feel free to leave below if you recognize this name anywhere else. So we begin. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos. I am the last. I will tell the audient void. I do not recall distinctly when it began, but it was months ago. The general tension was horrible. To a season of political and social upheaval was added a strange and brooding apparition of hideous physical danger, a danger widespread and all-embracing, such a danger as may be imagined only in the most terrible phantasms of the night. I recall that the people went about with pale and worried faces and whispered warnings and prophecies which no one dared consciously repeat or acknowledge to himself that he had heard. A sense of monstrous guilt was upon the land, and out of the abysses between the stars swept chill currents that made men shiver in dark and lonely places. There was a demonic alteration in the sequences of seasons. The autumn heat lingered fearsomely, and everyone felt that the world and perhaps the universe had passed from the control of known gods or forces to that of God or forces that were unknown. And it was that the Nyarlathotep came out of Egypt. Who he was, none could tell, but he was an old native blood and looked like a pharaoh. The Philian knelt when they saw him, yet could not say why. He said he had risen up out of the blackness of 27 centuries, and that he had heard messages from places not of his planet. Into the lands of civilizations came Nyarlathotep, swarthy, slender, and sinister, always buying strange instruments of glass and metal and combining them into instruments yet stranger. He spoke much of the science of electricity and psychology, and gave exhibitions of power which sent his specters away speechless, yet which swelled his fame to exceeding magnitude. Men advised one another to see Nyarlathotep, and shuddered, and where Nyarlathotep went, rest vanished, for the small hours were rent with the screams of nightmares. Never before had the screams of nightmare been such a public problem, now that the wise men almost wished they could forbid sleep in the small hours, that the shrieks of cities might less horribly disturb the pale, pitying moon, as it glimmered on green waters, gliding under bridges and old steeples, crumbling against the sickly sky. I remember when Nyarlathotep came to my city, the great, the old, the terrible city of unnumbered crimes. My friend had told me of him, and of his impelling fascinations, and allurement of his revelations, and I burned with eagerness to explore his uttermost mysteries. My friend said that they were horrible and impressive beyond most fevered imaginings, that when what was thrown on a screen in the darkened room prophesied things none of Nyarlathotep dared prophesy, and that in the sputter of his sparks there were taken from men that which had never been taken before, yet which shrewd only in the eyes. I heard it hinted abroad that those who knew Nyarlathotep looked on sights which others saw not. It was the hot autumn that I went through the night, with the restless crowds to see Nyarlathotep, and through the stifling night, and up the endless stairs into the choking room, and shadowed on the screen, I saw hooded forms amidst ruins, and yellow, evil faces peering from behind fallen monuments, and I saw the world battling against blackness, against the waves of destruction from ultimate space, whirling, churning, struggling around the dimming, cooling sun. Then the sparks played amazingly around the heads of the spectres, and hair stood up on end, while shadow more grotesque than I can tell came out and squatted on the heads. And when I, who was colder and more scientific than the rest, mumbled a trembling protest about imposture and static electricity, Nyarlathotep drave us all out, down the dizzying stairs into the damp, hot, deserted midnight street. I screamed aloud that I was not afraid, that I never could be afraid, and others screamed with me for solace. We swore to one another that the city was exactly the same and still alive, and when the electric lights began to fade, we cursed the company over and over again and laughed at the queer faces we made. I believe we felt something coming down from the greenish moon, from where we began to depend on its light. We drifted into curious, involuntary formations, and seemed to know our destination, though we dared not think of them. Once we looked at the pavement, and found the blocks loose, and again we saw a tram-car, lone, windowless, dilapidated, and almost on its side. When we gazed around the horizon, we could not find the third tower by the river, and noticed that the silhouette of the second tower was ragged at the top. Then we split, and the narrow columns, each of which seemed drawn in a different direction. One disappeared in a narrow alley to the left, leaving only the echo of a shocking moan. Another filled down a weed-choked subway entrance, howling with a laughter that was of madness. My own column was sucked towards the open country, and presently felt a chill which was not of the hot autumn, for as we stalked out on the dark moor, we beheld around us the hellish moon glitter of evil snows, trackless, inexplicable snows, swept asunder in one direction only, where lay a gulf all the blacker for its glittering walls. The column seemed very thin, indeed, as it prodded dreamily into the gulf. I lingered behind, for the black rift and the green-litten snow was frightful, and I thought I had heard the reverberations of the disquieting wail as my companions vanished. But my power to linger was slight, as if beckoned by those who had gone before. I half floated between the titanic snowdrifts, quivering and afraid, into the sightless vortex of the unimaginable, screaming, sentient, dumbly delirious. Only the gods that were can tell. A sickened, sensitive shadow, withering, and hands that are not hands, and whirled blindly past ghastly midnights of rotting creation, corpses of the dead worlds with swords that were cities, channeled winds that brush the pallid stars and make them flicker low. Beyond the world's vague ghost of monstrous things, half-seen columns of unsanctified temples that rest on nameless rock beneath space and reach up dizzy vacuums above the spheres of light and darkness. And through the revolting graveyard of the universe, the muffled, maddening beating of drums and thin, monstrous whine of blasphemous flutes from inconceivable, unlightened chambers beyond time, the detestable pounding and piping whereunto dance slowly, awkwardly, and absurdly the gigantic, tenebrous ultimate gods, the blind, voiceless, mindless gargoyles whose soul is Nyarlathotep. Such concludes the reading of Nyarlathotep. I love the way that people didn't believe in the Eldritch being or its magic and were driven into madness because of it. That is what I'm getting from the story. I also love how we were told about the hot autumn sun beating overhead during most of the story, and at the ends of madness, not even the seasons could stay the same, much to parallel the beginning entry of the story, where they were saying that humanity itself was noticing a shift in the universe. The shift must have took place when they weren't believing and were saying that it was just imposture and static electricity, when Nyarlathotep couldn't be more real. The seasons, the madness, being a chamber beyond time. This Eldritch deity definitely was presenting itself, not for the good of mankind, but for the madness behind one's own inner eye, your own thoughts and doubts of what's real, what's right, and what's wrong. But, of course, my lovely Lovecraftians, I'd love to know what you think. And until next time, bye-bye.